Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Poker Model Hand Breakdown today. Have a cool move for you today. We're going to break it down, and it's one of those where you have a large stack and you can get a little bit tricky. So join me in this hand. Here we go. Okay, I'm holding 5 of hearts, 6 of hearts, 5-6 suited connector in the big blind. I have 16,000 chips. Blinds are 1-2. So I have a large stack. I have over 50 big blinds. The 50 big blind threshold would be 10,000. I have 16,000. So in my mind, I'm thinking I have about 6,000 chips. I don't want to say to mess around with, but to get a little tricky and maybe apply some pressure to lower stacked opponents. Now, if there's a raise, 5-6 suited is a call behind hand from the button, so I'd call that raise. If there's no raise at all and maybe just calls, I'd check to see a cheap flop. Let's see how the action comes around. All right, so the action actually folds to the small blind, who has 6,000 chips, which is 30 big blinds. Small blind raises to 400. So again, in the big blind, we have a wider range of call behind hands than outside if there's just one raise. So here I'm going to call with my 5-6. We're going to take it to the flop, and I'm going to slightly expand my range of call behind hands due to this position. Now, before I do that and move to the flop, I want to break something down for you here. So I want to talk about, because how we qualify our hands, good, mediocre, bad, that we can kind of get ahead of the hand here. So hear me out. So there's a raise coming at us for 400. Now, I already know that I'm not going to fold. We already took that off the table because this is a call behind hand from this position. If I raise right now, then I'll take control of the hand. But the issue is that he could 4-bet me or raise me back, and now I've created this whole pot, and I won't even get to see a flop. Now, obviously, if he calls my raise, we'll go to a flop, and we can play it from there. But if I just call, which is one of the options that we discussed, the action is going to be on my opponent first. And we can almost expect a continuation bet from my opponent on the flop, just like we would make if I call this raise. So now, before the flop even comes out, I know that the flop, I'm guaranteed going to see a flop by calling this bet here. And I know that the flop is going to be good, mediocre, or bad for me. So I actually can be thinking right now in my head, before the flop comes out, if the flop is bad, I'm going to raise his continuation bet and try to win the pot right there. Or if he checks, I'm going to make a bet to try to win the pot right there. So those are the only two real options that could happen if I flop a bad hand. If I flop a mediocre hand and he makes a continuation bet, then I'll call and try to move to the hand like we've discussed. And if I flop a good hand, then I'll be raising his bet. But the point I want to make in today's hand is, like, I can actually think about all those things having to do with his bets before they even occur. So the point here is we're thinking about what he's going to do on this flop regardless. So what I'm thinking right now is I'm going to call this bet. If I hit something big, I'm going to raise. If it's mediocre, I'm going to call. And if it's bad, I'm going to bet. But that all has to do with him making a continuation bet or not. But in any of those scenarios, I can kind of take control of the hand and win a pot with my big stack, or learn that he actually had a big hand. So anyways, let's actually get to the flop here before I talk too much about it. Make the call. The flop is King 10-10, which is a bad hand. I have nothing. I have 6 high, I missed all my draws, whatever, and I'm facing a $400 continuation bet. So just like before, we already knew if there was a bad flop and there was a bet that came out like this, that would be a continuation bet, we would raise this bet, put a lot of pressure on my shorter stacked opponent, and know that because I have over 50 big blinds, I'm within the rights to make this play according to the poker model. So that's what I do. I raise here about 3 times his bet, and he folds. And I win the pot. So I'm glad you saw that example today. Remember, it's about planning ahead. It's not going to work every time. But this is an example of where, because you have a large stack, you already know that you're going to make a play on the pot. The only thing that's going to slow you down is if you do flop a mediocre or a good hand, then you're going to play it like you would. But regardless, you're going to be able to raise and try to steal that pot on the flop with a bad hand. So again, thanks for checking us out today. We really appreciate all of our listeners and watchers and readers. Let us know if you have questions, and we'll see you next time on the Poker Model Hand Breakdown. As always, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Poker Model Hand Breakdown. For more training tools and Texas Hold'em advice, subscribe to our YouTube channel or pay us a visit at thepokermodel.com to see our weekly articles, bi-weekly podcasts, and other episodes of the Poker Model Hand Breakdown. Until next time.